坚持好，基本上Friends of ours. Okay, so it's 6:30, so let's begin this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. The recording of the meeting will remain online for 4 years, and if you are present in the chamber, you are consenting to appearing in the recording and broadcast, which may also be used for training purposes. Before we enter the substantive part of the meeting, as members can see, we have another busy agenda this evening. Please could I ask members of the committee to keep your questions succinct and direct, and remind cabinet members and officers in attendance to proceed directly to the answer, again keeping them concise and relevant, not looking at particular any cabinet members. Please could I also ask that we just keep everything succinct. Okay, so first item, looking at my prompt sheet, Lauren, apologies. Do you have any apologies for absence other than my Aberdale colleague, Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have apologies for Councillor Jones and Councillor Bell, I understand. So Councillor Chambers is here as a substitute.
So I think this is the first meeting since the committee had to be slightly readjusted to take into the fact that Councillor Lorraine was no longer a member of the Conservative group. Conservatives have lost one member, is that right? And we're joined by John from the Labour group. Okay, so go on to item 2, the declarations of interest. Declarations, Owen.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a board member of Gloucestershire Airport, which is on the agenda tonight. Do you want me to step out for that conversation?
I'll look to my colleague, the monitoring officer.
The committee isn't making any decisions this evening, so as long as you don't take part in the debate, then I think that would be fine.
Okay, thanks. So minutes of the last meeting, can I approve those as a true record and sign them? Can we approve them as a true record and sign them? Is that okay? All those in favour? Any against? No. Okay. Public question time. No members of the public. So petitions and deputations, none that I'm aware of. And then we're going to change the agenda around slightly and take the airport update first. So, Mr. Hilton, Councillor, sorry, that's up to you to lead us through the update since Horizon deal dropped. The floor is yours.
Okay, well, we came to the Scrutiny Committee on the 2nd of March and gave you an update where we were. We were close to the deadline. We got to the deadline. I think it's clear that we made the right decision to withdraw from the process. The original offer that Horizon Aero Group made to us, which was above the asking price. It was the best offer and certainly the best business plan. But I think one or two of their backers that were listed at the time withdrew from it. And we know the chief executive of Horizon Aero Group had spent quite a bit of time attempting to secure other backers to it, and was unable to do that and made an offer that was unacceptable to both councils. We discussed that with Rowena Hay, the leader of Cheltenham Borough Council, reminding everybody that this is not a Gloucester City only decision. It's a decision that needs to be made by both councils. So there's always a level of compromise between the two leaders as well. on it, but there's absolutely, I think you need to clarify right from the beginning that when Savills issued the sales prospectus, we made it quite clear, absolutely clear, that it was being sold as an operational airport and nothing else. And there were robust covenants being required of the buyer, and also overage charges in the event of the airport were to fail in a few years' time, to protect the council's own assets. In other words, we didn't undersell it, and there was detailed discussions about the exact areas of the airport which were for this purpose and that purpose. Yeah, there's nobody at fault here. I think everybody really tried their very best. I know the officers of both Cheltenham Borough Council and Gloucester City Council, and also our agents, Savills and solicitors, BPE, worked really hard to deal with that. I mean, it is a very difficult and complicated site, so we do know that we have an exceptionally good data room if we were to put the airport back up for sale. But in the meantime, the short-term objective is to keep the airport operational. We've been there reassuring the staff that work for Gloucestershire Airport and also the tenants that it's our objective to keep the airport operationally in place while we look at the options for the future. And if you want to ask me about what are the options for the future, I'll tell you I don't know. I'm hoping to have a meeting next week with all the senior team where I'll be presented with some options. And I'll chuck in my others. You know, we haven't got anywhere near to that process yet of deciding what we need to do is keep calm and considered and take our time on it. But it's unfortunate the sale fell through. Chair will know that it was never my first objective to sell the airport, but Cheltenham Borough Council were set on selling the airport, and after a few months of consideration, I thought that was the only solution available to keep it operational at that time, is to sell it to some company that would pay a good price for it, but also had the working capital to invest in things like new hangarage, the development of the CGX business park, and to install up-to-date radar there, and to try and push the airport to the front of where it needs to be, which is a place for business jets to land and be stored and maintained, things like that. There's the landing fees and the sales fees and everything else for a business jet are considerably better than for single propeller private aircraft. They don't make much money for the airport at all. We need those other ones in there. But in order to get those jets in, you need to have the hangars. I'm quite clear from arriving at the airport, having got the leadership back, that I was surprised that the area in the southeast corner had not been developed in the 9 years since I was the chair of the board. And I would have thought that was something that would have really helped the airport develop. But there you are, we're where we are, and nobody's to blame. It's just one of those things, a sale fell through. And the bidders worked really hard, and I know the chief executive of Horizon worked exceptionally hard to try and get the purchase over the line. That's why we gave him extra time while he was seeing if he could secure other backers. When I say, I don't know whether there's one or two backers withdrew from his consortium. And bear in mind also the number 2 bidder was a consortium as well. And there's others who've written to us since then who are consortiums. Most of those interested in operating the airport were consortiums. I think I'd be worried if it was an operator of another airport anyway. It might be just an opportunity to drag some traffic over to their airport before they closed it down. So it was better that it was independent. That's all I've got to say, Chair. any questions. And we'll say Andy's here. Let's make it clear. Last time round we were here, that the point is Andy and the officers have been doing all the negotiations. They've just been keeping me informed. I have not been down there meeting the bidders. I've just been kept informed. We made a decision to sell to them. It was then up to the officers and our agents to go through all the negotiations and do all the due diligence.
Just a quick question for me on what you've just outlined. You started by almost saying, well, initially I didn't want to get involved in the sale of the airport, but Cheltenham Borough Council twisted my arm and I had to. So what you were saying? Was that the reality?
Reality is I've always been very positive towards Gloucestershire Airport. That's why I served on the board for 7 years. I've always done my very best to ensure that it was a success. I think you and me were on the Joint Airport Committee back in the 1980s as well, when Ray Darby was in charge. So it was just not, the decision to sell was a hard-nosed business decision, which I thought was the best for the airport's future. And that was the only way of getting the working capital in to develop the airport.
So just very quickly, another question for me, then we'll open it up to the rest of the committee. Every time you and Mr. Hearn came to the meetings, to our meetings, you'd say, still working, and you chose your words very carefully as well. At what point during the last 8 months did you realise that the game was up and that it was never going to happen?
For me personally, a few weeks ago, when we were getting near to the end, we were waiting for the final offer, but I didn't know for sure until a couple of weeks ago. I got the copy of the letter from Horizon Aero Group, giving us the last 2 offers and receiving advice from officers that it probably was unacceptable. To take time to read it a few times before I also agreed that with the leader of Cheltenham Borough Council that it wasn't acceptable. It was nowhere near the original offer price and would have left us with a liability to operate an airport. There seemed no point in continuing with a sale which didn't meet our original requirement, that you bought the airport for above the asking price. You had a business plan for development of the airport, and you had the working capital to buy and to develop the airport. And there would be strict overage conditions and covenants on the site to ensure that it was only developed for aviation and business purposes and nothing else.
So I'll open it up to questions, members' questions. Anybody? Steph Chambers.
Oh yeah, thanks, Liam. I've got a few, but I'll just do this one for now. When you made the decision, you paused it, and then you made the decision to go ahead with the sale, the airport wasn't in such a loss. So I've got 2 questions in relation to that. What was going on during the last 8 months, that how it's slipped into 2.7 million deficit? And you mentioned that you'd be taking a calm approach to making a decision to look forward, but what are you going to do to mitigate that immediate £1.4 million that this council is going to face in covering that airport loss?
I think the turnaround of the airport, we need to go in and have chats with the airport board and the chair of the board. I think we've had some of those, and we'll be looking at how we can turn it around. I mean, it was interesting when I took over that I spoke to some of the independent non-executive directors who'd resigned, and I think one of the things they felt frustrated with is that certain developments at Gloucestershire Airport were not being proceeded with because these shareholders, and that wasn't me as a shareholder, were holding back and saying we can't go ahead with these developments because we're about to sell the airport. So let's put it this way: the decision to sell the airport was done rather privately by the former administration. We managed to tease that out. Terry will remember when we teased that out at Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And that's, that's where we were. Savills had been appointed by Richard Cook, not by me, and the process was there. I just halted it, just give myself time as leader of the council to understand all the variations and options. And there's some options that are not available because of the position of Cheltenham Borough Council. So it's just a hard decision. We took that decision to full council, and we had a successful, fairly successful bidding process for an airport that was operating at a loss. But we need to sort that one out. But I don't know what the solutions are at this point in time. I don't know whether you have anything else to say, Andy. No.
Thank you. Just to come back, I just had a question on two questions now. What was the date of the letter that they gave the offers? And then another thing that we've discussed previously was that I think some of the re-evaluations of the leases, etc., hasn't been done since 2017. Is that work now progressing?
The date of the final options of proposals, the two options which were proposed by Soma, the chief executive of Horizon Aero Group, was 12th of March. The 12th of March, 10 days after the last scrutiny committee. So the leases are being reviewed.
Yeah, then to your second point on the leases, from a meeting I had with the businesses and stakeholders today, my understanding is actually the leases have been reviewed in the last couple of years, not 2017, and actually it was a point that they raised today about those lease renewals and the money that they're paying. So I believe that has been done, but as part of this process, yes, we have to do that. So we are reviewing the leases, but I don't necessarily think that that is the answer. I don't think that's where the headroom is necessarily. I think we need to look at bringing new business in as well as looking at our existing tenants.
Yeah, in regards to the leases, I wasn't looking. I was just thinking if one option will be to sell the airport. I know there was lots of clauses, sell it for other purposes. There was lots of clauses in those leases that meant that it would cost us to do that. So just wondered how much that cost. And I did ask recently at group leaders, and I was told it wasn't done since 2017. So it's good to know it has been done more recently.
Yeah, so I understand that the preferred bidder wasn't able to gather the funds to obviously complete the purchase. Obviously, there's been talk about it requires a lot of investment as well and further development to make it more profitable. Was this they couldn't raise enough for the purchase price, or was this they couldn't raise enough for the purchase price and have the headroom to do that further investment on top?
I'm not sure, Liam, but they couldn't purchase the price. They couldn't pay us the money to buy the airport at the offer price. And they would have had to put in capital investment, and they had a 3-stage plan of which they had the funds when we met them around the table. I think it was May of the 24, I can't remember now. A business plan where, and one of the points I actually asked them was, you're going to have to raise some further capital to go to stage 2, stage 3, and they said yes, that would be the plan. The initial one was to get the radar in and turn the airport around. Some of the operating losses, of course, are down to the cost of borrowing the money to repay the councils for the investment in the new runway, which is only a few years old.
Okay, so if it were to be sold again, would there have been any condition that they had had a certain amount, being able to show that they could do that future investment. So say if we were to sell again, buyer number 2 comes along, they can raise the funds to make the purchase, but then they don't have any money to invest into it. Would there be any kind of clause we can put in to make sure that someone can't buy it that's then going to immediately go bankrupt because they can't raise the funds to make it profitable?
I'll answer if it's more helpful. So just to be really clear, that if there was any further sale process, it would have to go back through the same process it went through before. It can't just now be engaging anybody that's coming forward saying that they're willing to purchase the airport. We'd have to have it revalued, and it'd have to go back out through the same market bid process. And we have had quite a few people, confidentially come to us and say, "Oh, well, we could do it." Can't do that. But just to answer your question, in terms of the bidding, there's 2-stage bid in the procurement process. HAG, Horizon Aero Group, were the strongest bid on a number of factors. 1, they were the strongest bid overall on offer. 2, they had an incredibly strong, committed level of capital expenditure over a period of time they wanted to put into the airport. And 3, they had funding evidence in the form of statements, which at that time of the due diligence is all you require. Now, they also had the business plan that suggested that it would be to be run as an airport, and a very strong business plan at that. Bidder 2 was also a very strong bidder, not quite as high in terms of the purchase price, but equally committed to putting in capital, because that's what they recognised would be needed to turn the airport around. The issue is that their business plan was good, but it wasn't quite as strong. It left some loopholes in terms of potentially what might come down the future, and Horizon Aero Group were very much committed to wanting to keep it as an airport. And thirdly, materially, there was a difference in the debt to equity. So when HAG came forward, they were actually providing equity statements to suggest funding. So therefore, the gearing was lower and the risk was lower. Now, we now know that that's obviously fallen away, which can happen during a sale process. But when you're going through that bid and through that process itself, you have to go with what's in front of you, and that is the best bid. There was only 2 bids suggested to go through to the final selection because the third bid was so far away from the mark price that it wouldn't have been a viable option, wouldn't have been a viable offer. The other point just to make is that the level of due diligence spend, which Horizon Aero Group reported to us that they've spent nearly £1 million on their own due diligence through the process, they can only spend that money once they are the selected bidder. They're not going to spend that money without knowing that they're the selected bidder. They reported those numbers to us, which gives you some kind of intent as to how seriously they took it, and that's their own money, their own purchase to do the due diligence. So I hope that helps put some context.
And final question, bit unrelated. I'm wondering whether, as an option for moving forward to try and make it more profitable, whether there's been any discussions of a potential Gloucester air show, given that Gloucester is the home of Frank Whittle and the jet engine, and we have the Jet Age Museum, and it's kind of the home of the jet age. It seems weird that so many airports around the country have air show days, but we don't have that in Gloucester. So just thinking that might be something worthwhile to put towards the board as a potential profitability move forward.
No, I think we had air shows in the past. We also had motorcycle racing on the airport as well. I remember going there in my youth and watching the motorcycle racing. We also had services to Jersey and the Isle of Man, but they've stopped and they've not restarted. And we know, was it Manx.com? Did they go? I think they struggled to make a living out of it, and I'm not sure whether they went out of business or not, but they were flying here as well. The business planning is always said that the most effective thing to do is to bring in business jets. The landing fees are so much greater. And you don't need so many flights, of course, and the fuel sales you'll get, and also the fact that at the airport there's maintenance there for those sort of aircraft. The only way you can really encourage more of those aircraft in is to have the hangar space. And the one I think from my time, the directors will know, is that the airport has always had a full set of hangars, but what it doesn't have is enough hangars to take in the new business. And that's why I say, we, during my time as chair, we built a road and maybe got a hangar or two built in the southeast corner. And there's quite a bit of land there ready, waiting for new hangars. The thing about hangars is, the council's got the capital to build them, but they're not that expensive in terms of industrial units. They are a lot of concrete, a steel frame and cladding, and big enough to take in aircraft for other services. So they're not exceptionally expensive. And that's, I'll say, well, I think one of the difficulties of growing that area of the business. But I think everybody's said, and I think the two bidders as well saw that as an important way of developing aviation at the airport. There are other options as well, of course, but we don't. The Gloucestershire Airport doesn't make it. It's got a lot of training flights and stuff like that, but that's not where an airport will make its real money. So most of the airport is effectively operating because it's also a commercial and industrial estate. I think Stephanie went on about the valuation. There's a lot of tied-in leases which are based on the airport continuing, and the compensation from a lot of those businesses will be quite heavy. That was discussed in 2017 when we, I think, agreed to fund the rebuilding of the main runway there and the other one.
Sorry, final question, then I'll let some other people who cover.
Question was the last question. So
Sorry,
you sure
if allow me to have one last quick question. We know it needs a lot of investment. Do we have a rough idea of how many millions it needs to be invested in it to make it profitable, given that it's currently losing us millions at the moment?
I can't give you those figures off my head. I'd have to go and check the files and see what the business plans were, and I haven't looked at those for some time. But it's more than this council has got spare cash, let's put it that way, or Cheltenham Borough Council. That's one of the problems. The one thing that would happen if we get through LGR, whatever the options, the single or the two options, the airport will be owned by the whole county rather than just two district councils. So it will either be owned by a single unitary or be owned, whatever the model, by two unitaries with a lot more capital. And it's possible that, if we get the Foundation Strategic Authority as well for Gloucestershire, which I know the county council's planning to bid, there might well be possibilities of securing government economic development for it as well. But they might want to do that with a private operator. I'm not sure what. Both the bidders knew that they had to put in substantial development. And we made sure when we were looking at the bidders, that not only did they get over the £25 million asking price, but two, they had a strong business plan, and it made it quite clear in the sales literature that it had to be a very strong business plan to develop the airport, because we knew, some of these business plans were very similar to the same business plan that the airport has as well.
Okay, so next week, you, Anne Radley.
Thank you, Chair. Do you have any idea how much money the impact the airport has onto the local sort of growth of the local economy?
It's substantial. There's about 50 people working for Gloucestershire Airport, but there's the businesses there, there's 1,000 or more, I think, the people working there, and quite a number of those jobs are aviation-based. Some of them aviation-based, which might not require an operational airport, but others like the maintenance of jet aircraft and stuff like that, or training pilots and things like that. There's a lot of pilots learn to fly at Gloucestershire Airport. Those sort of things are. And it's the thing I've always liked about the airport is that you could have another commercial industrial unit there, but it'd be much the same as Waterwells or the old Gloucester Business Park. Whereas what you've got here is a clear mix and something that's innovative in creating those skilled aviation-based jobs, which otherwise wouldn't be in Gloucestershire or certainly in the Central Severn Vale if the airport was no longer here.
Thank you. You've moved into my follow-up a little bit because I'm interested, if the airport isn't there as a functioning airport, would that have, as the impact that might have on our local area? So far, we've been thinking very much about it being a functional airport, and it would be good to understand why there's been that focus on it being a functional airport.
Well, the focus on it being a functional airport, because that's what it is. It's been that since 1930. It's been an airport for years and years. And there's a lot of businesses that are there because it's an airport. There are businesses like, maybe freight forwarders that are there because if you're a freight forwarding business, if you've got an address at Gloucestershire Airport, sounds a bit better than some business park in the middle of nowhere. It's important. But it's been an operational airport. And when we looked at the extension of the runway in 2017, the cost of, if you made a decision to close it down, you first of all immediately would have put the airport into an operational loss and much greater than it is. And you would have major compensation to pay out because there are businesses there that have got very long leases. So the actual cash value of this land was never what the some people would say it was, because the cost of running an airport down. I mean, the objective has always been, and it was in the manifesto and it was in the corporate plan, that we would do what best we could to secure the future of Gloucestershire Airport. Nothing else. It was nothing to say that we were planning anything else. That's always been my objective as leader of the council, is that the airport has a future. We need to try and secure it. It's a pity this deal fell through, but it doesn't mean a future deal with a private investment can't do the same. We'll see.
Thank you. And again, you mentioned it a little bit in discussion, but you mentioned that there's interest coming forward. Does it feel like any of that interest is sort of proceedable, that it might lead to the conditions where a sale may be possible again?
As Andy said, if we were to put it up for sale again, we'd have to put it back on the market and it'd have to be a competitive bid. But I've received letters, and I know the lead Charlton Borough Council has received letters. I'm not sure they're the same letters and inquiries from others who think they're interested. We'd have to just go through the process again. We can't just sort of say, yeah, that's all right, let's have a cup of coffee or chat over a beer and do a deal. We're going to have to put it back out and do it properly. But we've had letters in. I've had letters in from those who've failed to succeed the first time round. Maybe if it goes out again, they will have to reconsider their generosity and their bid to succeed. That's that way. There's no plans to undersell the airport.
Thank you, and I'll save the rest of my questions for later, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, back to the other side of the room. Councillor Pullen, and then you, and then Alistair. Thanks.
Yeah, excuse me. Thank you, Chair. It sort of builds on a question that Anne was asking, really, because we're back to square one, aren't we? We've been through a bidding process. We haven't identified a successful buyer, and and the airport continues to make a loss, £2.7 million or whatever it is a year. One of the reasons is because from an operational aircraft point of view, it's quite simple. The runway isn't long enough to be to attract aircraft in a profitable sense. We talked about 1930. Well, maybe when it was put up, it was quite viable, but, we've moved on a bit since then. So it is an absolutely strategic, valuable site for Gloucestershire. And we know we're about to move into, a local government reorganisation. So surely it's time to look at a bigger picture and say, here we have a really strategic site for Gloucestershire. And did we not ought to now be saying to all of the other councils across the county, who ultimately will be the shareholders in this airport, and talk to the broader business community in Gloucestershire to say, what is it we want from this really important strategic site in terms of its use going forward? Is that an airport, or is that something else?
It seems like, Terry, that you might suggest it should be something else, but like we said, the immediate thing is to keep the airport operational. We know we've got inquiries in from others who are interested in as an airport, and we need to evaluate every option and look at that. So nothing has been struck off at the moment, nothing at all. But we need to look at all that. But the immediate objective is to maintain the airport, and I'm sure conversations will be had between Cheltenham and Gloucester and the other local authorities. I've already had a one-to-one chat with the leader of Chicksby Borough Council, who, of course, the airport currently sits, who was interested in business development there, but I can't say any more than that. But everything's up for consideration. It'd be useful to know if there are members in this chamber today who think it should not be sold off as an airport. I mean, that was the objective right from the beginning, and we'll look at everything that there's to consider all the scenarios. Yeah.
If you don't mind, can I just add something into that? Because I think the context here is really important. You've also got businesses operating out of the airport right now. And this is a bit of a catch-22 in the sense that I've met with the businesses today, and I do have a degree of empathy for them, because at the end of the day, they're a business and they're trying to plan for the next 5-10 years. They can't do that without future certainty, and we can't give them future certainty right now because things have not gone the right way. The airport sale was designed, and I did say this today, everything that's been done over the last 8 months, albeit, whatever you may think about it, everything that's been done over the last 8 months has been done in the best interest of the businesses, the community, trying to keep it as an airport, trying to pull in the capital that's required to make the airport successful. It's all been done for those people, okay? And today they asked me some really harsh questions about what's happening. Can we invest in our own businesses? Can we be forward thinking? The reality is right now, LGR is a factor in all of this because it's going to have to be, and there's going to have to be broader conversations. But the immediate focus has to be, as we've already said, trying to plug the operational deficit that's the loss. That's not just going to magically happen. And as the businesses will quite rightly say, if they're going to invest, they need some long-term security. If they invest, then naturally things will grow on the airport, but they're not going to do that until they know what's actually coming. So we've got a real job on our hands over the next couple of months to get to a place where officers can work on options to present to shareholders to say, look, the reality is that if you did this, this and this, the operational airport could be successful and could grow and it could contribute to the economy and ultimately it could make a profit, or there's no way it's going to do that because actually it's just running itself at a loss and it's going to continue to do so. until that work's done, no one can give any kind of security over the next few years. But what we do know is that there is interest in the airport. There's interest in other brands and tenants who might want to be at the airport as well. And I think one of the key things I took away from the meeting with them today is whatever the discussions are going to have about the long term, the immediate priority right now needs to be to take the cloud off of the airport, because there is a dust cloud across it and it's affecting the business community and it's affecting the wider stakeholder landscape. So we need to try and reframe it. The airport is still, for the immediate presence, is still going to be operating, and we need to do everything we can to support the people on there so that they are just as successful. And that is the biggest message that can be delivered from today, whilst we then start to twin track what the future can look like. And we can't do that until we actually have an evidence base. Will it go back to market? Maybe. But if it goes back to market, it has to go on the right parameters and it has to go through the right process. And it has to undertake another valuation because the value has now decreased because the operational loss has increased. I hope that's clear.
Thank you for that. But I'm pleased to hear at least that, you know, the bigger picture for the airport has not been discounted here. And I do take your point about the businesses that are there looking for some medium-term security, never mind short-term. The issue is, of course, though, we still go back to the fact that the airport is losing money. And I understand that one of the answers is to reduce operating costs and increase income. And I haven't heard anything concrete yet as to what that actually means. How are we going to increase income and how are we to reduce costs? And with the greatest of respect, why have we been waiting this long? The airport has been making a loss for a number of years, and only now are we saying, well, hang on a minute, we've got to do something about this.
The objective at the time was to sell the airport off. It was understood by the buyers that the airport was operating at a loss, and some of the proposals to possibly turn it around needed to be done by further capital investment, which is why it was being sold, because we didn't have the capital investment to all the risk profile to do that. Terry, there's lots of things that need to be discussed, thrown in the pile. There's a lot of questions that you might want to ask. There's a lot of questions I want to ask when we have a meeting and discussions with Cheltenham Borough Council as well. It's just too early to say how we've got to do it, but we'll have to do something about the operational losses. Frankly, doing something about the operational losses might well make the airport more attractive to buyers as well. And I think that might well have had a problem in the purchase. But that's where we are. And I think if we're talking about the future aviation and the operation of the airport, Chair, I think you want to have a meeting, don't you? Sometimes a joint committee. I think some of those questions need to be put to the possibly to the airport board or to the those operating the airport, rather than to us as the shareholders. I mean, my primary consideration right from the decision was to sell the airport as an operational airport and get the thing sold. That's the view. That was the view of Cheltenham Borough Council, very keen to sell it, so that the liability could be removed from the books of the two local authorities whose finances have both been squeezed after years of public sector squeezing of our budgets, and the fact that we haven't got the working capital. And of course, remembering that we've spent a lot of capital in recent years on the forum. It's just come into completion. So the council doesn't, that's why we'll be selling some of the assets, because the EFS application, because we do not have the working capital to do something with the airport. But also, I think it's whether the councils would have the appetite to take that risk or would think it's better to sell it. And I think the issue was the two councils, particularly Keener from Cheltenham, was to sell it. And we've not sold it, so we're going to have to go and try and sort some things out as quick as we possibly can. But we also have to think it through properly, and rushing into a decision might not be the best.
Okay, I'm a bit disappointed I didn't hear some initial ideas about how you might be looking to reduce costs and invest. So, I mean, what are we in? We're virtually in April. When do you think that plan will be in place? Because respectfully, I don't want to be sat here in October or November. We really do need to have a plan about what investment looks like, what reducing costs look like, how that's going to happen, and when it's going to be done by.
I think what he wants, and we all want the same, is a degree of urgency from you. We've had a letter saying no deal. What have you been doing? You should have been knocking on Cheltenham's door saying, hey, God, there's no point pointing to Mr. Hearn. I'm sure you can answer. You're the leader. It's a degree of urgency. We are just, I think, looking around the room, pretty amazed at how laid back you are about all of this when we are losing over £1 million, is it a year, Gloucester City's share? Over £1 million hemorrhaging. £1 million, and that's a lot of money for people in Gloucester to have to fork out for an airport which apparently we can't sell. With respect to Andy, Mr. Hearn, we want to hear what your take is, leader.
I think you need to listen to what Andy has to say. He wants to comment, and I think he should comment.
Do that, but a lot of people still want to speak. So what negotiations, detailed, not complicated, but in-depth discussions have you had with your opposite number at Cheltenham, for example, since we had that letter saying, sorry, but no deal? What's actually happened?
As I said, listen to the officers have been working on the options. Do you want to?
We'll take, Andy, no disrespect using your first name, but he's not the leader. You are, and we want to hear your idea. I apologise for jumping in. There are other people who want to speak. Just following up, Councillor Pullen, on your points.
I know I'm the leader, and I was rather annoyed by your comments made at full council. But the negotiations between two local authorities and discussions on technically operating the airport and everything else like that is currently being handled by officers, and they will be discussing with me and Rowena sometime next week a load of options on where we are. Also expect to have professional advice before I start answering questions. And I take my time, because the thing to do is to keep calm, is not to panic and not to rant, and to just say that the most important thing is that we get it right. And I'm waiting to have the reports from the officers, the ones that have been in discussions with Horizon Aero Group, the ones who've been receiving possible letters of interest from others who now think they want to run the airport. So let's wait until next week, and you'll have to wait until then. But Andy, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to make 2 points, and I won't take your time. But one is just to remember the role of the shareholders. We're not operational in this. Our role has been operational for the last 8 months because we've been going through a sale process. When you're the client, which we are, our role becomes more impactful because the buyer, all of the bidding process is done through us as the client. There is a board and a management team running the airport. So we're asking the same questions of that board and that management team. Okay, so it's not me. I'm not running the airport. I'm not the operations director there. I'm not the chief exec. I'm acting on behalf of you as the client to ask the same questions that you're asking of me. I spent 2.5 hours there today at the airport asking those questions. We're expecting the board and the management team to give us a presentation at the end of this month with where they think they're at in terms of how can we plug this gap, what sort of things can happen, I equally said to the customers, or the tenants today, that whilst we're not expecting you to solve this problem, you are the experts in the room. I've never worked in an airport, so you're the experts in the room. You tell us what you think, you tell us how to improve your businesses, tell us what you need, and then we will work with you. But ultimately, there is a management team and a board who need to come, and they need to tell us exactly what they think, as they are responsible for running that airport. We are the client and the shareholder, and there is a line, and our line now starts to come out of the way because the sale process is finishing.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. We look forward to hearing from you and from the board about where they think the ways forward around, reducing costs and increasing income. Thank you.
Okay, so looking at my assistant sheet, it's your turn. Sorry, Tristry.
Right, first of all, I would just like to acknowledge the hard work that officers did put into doing this, and it must be incredibly disappointing, the situation that we've found ourselves in. But my couple of questions. Now, you've said that if we did go back to market with the airport, we would have to start the process from scratch. How much of the work that was done the first time round would we be able to sort of regurgitate and use again?
The data room's there. I mean, in actual fact, the extended period while I was considering whether to take it to council to put it for sale gave the officers of both authorities to build the data room. This basically tells you that that property belongs to the airport, or that's leased out to a tenant, or and who's responsible for the maintenance of that property and everything else like that. So the data room is really good. And in actual fact, I think there's not been any challenges by Horizon to any extent that I'm aware of. And I think they were very complimentary about all the information was there. So if you were to put it out to market again, the prospectus and the sales literature have been prepared. You might want to change that. The data room is all there, so we don't have to go through populating. And the one thing about having a very strong data room means when you get an offer price, you don't then get oh, this is a problem, that's a problem, this is a problem, and you end up it falling for that. This fell because Horizon had one or two of their partners walk, and they needed to secure the funding that was supposedly on the table from another source. So it was nothing to do with what the council did. Absolutely nothing. The council didn't change the rules. It put out the sales budget. It provided all the data, or the two councils did, and that was available to the bidders in the due diligence, because Andy said they spent about £1 million on their due diligence. That would have been checking it. And I remember being told at the beginning that they were all over the airport, everywhere. They were the ones that came and looked at everything before they even put the offer in, much more so than others did. They were very thorough.
Okay, my next question is, you spoke about how we're going through government reorganisation, and actually, as part of a unitary authority, it might be that that would be the answer for the airport, to be part of that. We're 2 years away from that. Realistically, are we in a position as a council to be able to nurse the airport through to that point, if that's what it takes?
Well, I think that's something that we might have to discuss next week and in the immediate future about whether that's possible, and conversations with the other local authorities and what might be their appetite would also need to be considered in doing that. Whether we can, I mean, I think the issue is there comes a time when the government's made a decision and what the model will be, it could just come to a period during when you're preparing for transition that you need everybody's agreement in order to sell or dispose of anything anyway. So it's likely to be an issue that might affect the new unitary council or councils. So that's one of the considerations we'll have to think about, and what impact it is and what the timing is and everything. Not straightforward and simple. LGR is taking up an exceptional amount of time, or officer time already, and this is another issue that's on their desk.
And my last question, I remember that in the ESF application and funding things, the airport and its sale played quite a big role in how we were going to be able to repay and getting that money. The failure of the sale, how does that now leave us in regard to that ESF money and amount that we're going to not have to give them?
I think that's a question that would be best answered by an officer rather than a political leader.
Okay, yeah, I mean, just firstly, just to say, the 2-year weathering the storm, as it were, on the operational loss, that is something that we've obviously picked up in our senior management forum. It's on our risk register, and it's something that the 151 and the senior team are working through now. Clearly not ideal, because we've now got to consider it. I can see Ali over there, so she can always come in if needs be. But the reality is that the capital contribution the airport would have seen once all the debt was paid off was factored into our considerations, but wasn't completely put into the budget for this year. But yes, you know, the 4.5 million that would have been left once it was all gone would have gone towards our EFS recovery. That said, we've now lost that, so we've already started to look at what our secondary measures are. We know that we've got to achieve capital sales to pay off the EFS position, and we had a session on this last week and the week before at SMT around how we're going to do that. It largely sits in pushing forward some of the phase 1 and phase 2 sales to offset what that 4.5 million would have been, and we've got a plan around that. So yes, it's impacted, but we are starting to risk manage it, and we have a plan in place.
Mr. Chambers, Councillor.
Thanks, that was a great question. Actually, I was going to ask it myself. I was going to say, how much does the failed sale of the cost the taxpayer today, including legal, consultancy, officer time, as well as seller and agent fees?
I can't remember it, but it was in a council question that was published, and it's pretty modest. It's the similar impact on Cheltenham Borough Council, but bearing in mind that you need to incur that cost in order to sell an asset so complicated as this one, which was to do the due diligence and the mapping of the site and the development of the overage charges, the covenants and all those sort of things. So let's put it this way, it couldn't be done for nothing, but it was around 150,000, I think. But that's fairly modest for a sale of this nature. You know, you couldn't go to the local estate agents that sell houses and say, could you sell the airport, please? You probably end up with no bids of any note and no data room or anything else. It's a complicated thing, so you have to have experts in, and I'm sure you'd all expect us to employ experts in dealing with a sale like this. And this is one of, let's put it this way, the expenditure isn't as great as it was for Horizon Aero Group.
Wouldn't Alison have that figure?
He said 150.
Pardon?
I think he said 100.
Yeah, it's about 140. I can't remember the exact figure, but there was a public question at council of which I gave an answer. I just haven't got off the top of my head.
What does the failed capital receipt of 4.5 million now mean to council?
I think, well, Andy's given you some information. As far as the exceptional financial support and the 15.5 million, that is drawdown facilities. Now, it might mean that we have to draw down earlier, but we're also looking at bringing forward some assets for sale instead that were planned a bit later on to get them in, and there will be some reports going to the May Cabinet meeting about asset disposals and assets of the council. And Alistair, as a member of the Recovery Advisory Board, will get advance notice of that when the reports have been drafted.
It's been reported that the airport's now making a loss when before it was making a small profit. What's the loss per annum compared to the profit per annum before?
Probably easy for me to answer that. So when the marketing started back in 2024, the EBITDA approximate loss was 1.8 million across the two councils, so £900,000. And as we stand today, as you've seen, the estimated loss is around 2.7, so it'd be 1.35. So it's an increase of £450,000 per council.
Sorry, so the loss before sale was 1.8 million divided by 2, 900k, and then do you say it's 2.7 million loss now? I think it's my last.
Stabilised now, or is that expected to rise?
Yeah, turbulence, we don't know. But the objective, obviously, Andrew, is to drive down the losses. So that will be one of the first discussions we'll be having of what the immediate actions that can be taken by the airport board with the support of the shareholders to drive down those losses.
Turbulence is more like a crash landing, I would have thought. When the buyer's details were published, it didn't take long for the residents to find that Horizon Air Group was just established. It had no company accounts, no trading history, and the directors were part of a construction companies in India, as well as Horizon Air Group's logo was just made weeks before on ChatGPT when you clicked on it. Was that not enough evidence to prove that they weren't going to be a valid, genuine buyers?
It was a joint venture between a number of investors, and they had the money behind them. I think the issue is that I think one or two of the investors withdrew from the purchase and therefore left the chief executive of Horizon Aero Group in a quandary, and he had to see whether he could secure the investment from others. But that was thoroughly done, and comments made by people in the public domain about the Horizon Aero Group were not as well informed as the advice that was being received from Savills, and the due diligence that was done on that. They were effectively a consortium, so they were setting up a new company in order to trade through it, just like number 2 would have done, and number 3, one of the ones that was lower down who didn't make the grade because of the capital that they were prepared to pay, has written to me and Rowena about that. But they were all joint ventures, so they will have all set up a special purpose vehicle, which is a company that they would all be joining in order to operate it. And that would be normal practice, because if there's a number of investors and some of those investors were companies, they would have wanted to protect themselves from any debt failure that might have happened. The risk would have been their investment, and that would have been, and then if they wished to increase that investment, that would have been a decision they would have made, but that's normal practice. So that's why it was a new government. I mean, I would have been more worried about, regional airport company wanting to buy it and then just transfer the business trade to their airport and then just close it down. It's much better to have a joint venture. It's normal practice. It's nothing special.
Back in December, it was reported to me that the sales started to break down and deteriorate then with regards to the funding and the buyer having to go out to source other types of funding. Given that's the case, at the last meeting, Councillor Sajid Patel used the phrase "something was fishy." Seems like he is correct in that. Would you agree?
I very seldom agree with what Councillor O'Donnell has to say. It's usually ill-informed nonsense. There was nothing untoward. The processes we went through were solid, honourable, and absolutely the right thing to do. And we stuck to the original sales plan, and the professionals that were helping us, and the problems of Horizon were getting known by the end of last year, and we just made a decision to assist them and to allow them time to see if they could secure another partner to cover the partners that they lost. They weren't able to do that and provide us with the original sale price, which is why we said no and closed it down. You'd have done the same, Alistair, if you'd been in the same seat.
Just a very quick point on that as well. The buyer, even though they told us in December that they were struggling with one of their main investors, they didn't just randomly start going out and speaking to further funders. It's quite common practice to have secondary and tertiary investors, so that if things do fall through, you've got a backup plan to go to. They had a very strong list of very high-level profile investors who they engaged as part of their secondary investment profile. And I think I did say that to you when I came to ONS, that they were engaging at that level. Unfortunately, the money that he spent on his business plan just wasn't good enough for them to come in. But it's not like they just go and pluck things off Google and start looking at new funding money, because that's not the case.
Councillor, any more questions? No, okay, so Angela, over to you now. Thank you. Thanks for being patient, by the way.
Thank you, Chair. I may have missed a bit of the message, but I know there was an operating surplus when Councillor Hilton was, when he left the board of the airport. The airport was confident enough to invest in, I think you said a road, and they've levelled out the runway and a new hangar as well. So what was it, external economic factors that caused the loss from a surplus, or was it poor management at the airport? And I apologise if I've missed a message there.
I can't really say more than the feeling I have. I was on the board from 07 to 15, and the first half I was vice chair of the board, and then the chair of the board when we built the runway safety project on time and on budget. And the accounts show a small operating profit in 2015. I think it was 2015 or 2014. I'll just tell you, March 2015. You can go and have a look at them if you like. It was always like this, just along the line. And we did that work, but from then on, I had very little involvement in the airport other than any other member of the council when we had reports coming in. So I didn't take a detailed note. It was only having got to be leader of the council that I had to fully look through it. Members of Scrutiny can remember I also teased out the issue about discussions that were being had without disclosing them to anybody else, that both councils were considering the sale of the airport. So, I can't really comment on the decisions that were made because, one, I didn't serve on the board, but I was surprised, to be honest with you, having seen the presentation about the CGX business park and everything, which got money from the LEP for their road there as well, I was surprised that there weren't the additional hangars that were built there. So why that decision was made. None of the current board, well, none of the current Gloucester board members served on it. Most of them were independent, non-executive directors. I did have a conversation with one of them as part of my considerations on whether to put it up for sale.
Thank you. The world's changed a bit since our last conversation. There's war in the Middle East. I believe I read that an electric aircraft had been tested at the airport. How confident are you that the businesses that are there now will be able to, get through shortage of fuel supplies and that sort of thing, and maybe they're not affected by that at all? But, do you know what proportion of the businesses there would be dependent on fossil fuels in effect rather than renewables? Can you say?
I can't say that. I think that's one that might be better at the board. I think they're looking at using non-fossil fuel, aviation fuel, jet fuel. I'm not sure. So, but I honestly don't know, and I don't know what the impact of the bombing of Iran would have on it, and how I think none of us know whether the cost of our flights abroad might go up. I know I've had to cancel a flight in and out of Dubai because of the events, and I'm sure lots of others are affected by things like that. But I really couldn't say without asking the board, and they'll probably be looking at what impacts it might or might not have. But I don't think aviation is likely to cease to exist. It's not a technology that is in decline. It's one that's in a growth thing. And of course, modern aircraft are so much more fuel efficient than the ones a few years ago. But who knows?
Excuse me. So before I take Councillor Steph Chambers, what do you think has got to change to make the airport a more attractive proposition for other investors?
I think it'll be more attractive if it's operating at a flat line in a black. I mean, some of the losses it's projecting is really the cost of the borrowing for the works to the runway, and also, I mean, if there's a whole load of hangars there with more aircraft operating from the airport, then that would make it more vibrant and more attractive. But then if it started making a good operating profit, then maybe the councils would decide they didn't want to sell it. It's the fact that it's a liability to the councils is the reason for the councils wanting out, because of the difficulty of it doing it. And I always think there's always been a bit of difficulty of commercial strategy for the airport, because there's two councils with different nuances and members of each council, some pro and some not so pro, whereas being in private sector ownership with a private sector capital, there's likely to be a clear, decisive plan of how to push the airport forward, much more easier than trying to get two councils and shareholders together. I mean, it was difficult, wasn't it, for the to do the works of the runway and how it was funded.
Just move on. So, Councillor Steph Chambers, then we'll go around again.
Thank you, Chair. I've tried to pick up on a few bits. Firstly, I know you keep referring back to officers, and I understand they did the majority of the negotiations, but there was an involvement by yourselves, and I just wanted to make the point that, you know, happy to take the credit when things go right, and now it's all gone a bit pear-shaped. You're just pushing it back to officers again. Secondly, something else you mentioned, and I think you said Councillor O'Donnell, but I'm sure Councillor Chambers over there mentioned that Councillor Patel had asked a question, and you said it was uninformed nonsense. Now, some of the things that I saw on social media and that were reported by some of the local media stations have actually turned out to be true. Whether they were informed or not, I don't know, but you did mention that Horizon were quite active at going through to the airport and they were all on site there. And my understanding was that some of these concerns were coming from airport people that worked on the airport, so they could have got that kind of sense from Horizon staff that were there doing their due diligence. So I think we need to be really careful about calling people things uninformed nonsense when actually it has come to pass and the sale hasn't gone through to being successful. In that case as well, I think there needs to be a little bit more urgency, as other people had mentioned. And I know we don't want to rush into things, but at the moment, the residents of Gloucester and Cheltenham are picking up a £225,000 bill a month. Now, that's something that could buy an awful lot of services. So I think there does need to be more urgency. Another point that I'd want to make is, as has been said by Andy there, that we are not the operational members of running this airport. And considering it has gone down, we need to ask the question, had the management team or the board sort of given up with strategy, which they shouldn't have because it was being sold as a going concern. So would it be prudent for us as a committee chair to ask for the management team and the board to sort of come in front of us to see what sort of ideas everybody can come together with? And I know they're the experts, but maybe they need a little bit of more innovation and support from this council so we could get them in front of us, because no matter what's happening with that airport long term, we do need to be considering how to mitigate that loss really quickly. That also being said, there was two sort of questions that I wanted to ask about some of the immediate things that are being done. And I know you're wisely speaking to other councils in the area that maybe will be the shareholders if after LGR, if no sale goes forward before then. Are they willing to look at helping to mitigate the loss to just Gloucester and Cheltenham residents if they're looking at a proposal going forward? And then the other question is anybody speaking to central government to understand if such a strategic point, whether it's got aviation concerned or not, meets any of the central government's plans for the future?
Well, as far as the other councils, we've not had those conversations with them in enough detail. With regard to the comment about the whole process was fishy, that was what O'Donnell said, and I said I didn't agree with him. I thought it was disingenuous comments that have been... was it Councillor Patel? Well, I thought you said Councillor... No, it was Councillor Patel. Well, he was wrong. That's all I got to say. And it's getting a bit tiring with these attempts to create personal attacks and personal comments about individuals. But to suggest that people have been acting untoward is, I think, completely disingenuous. I know everybody's worked really, really hard over the process, and everybody's honourable, nothing but honourable in this process. Nothing more to say, Chair.
On your suggestion about the SMT, senior management team, can you just expand on that a little bit, please, your ideas?
In regards to the airport, I just think it would be good to understand what's going wrong from their point of view, their management in skill in aviation, and understand what they think is going wrong, what things they think, you know, just their ideas. And then we can sort of understand, really, is that an issue that these councils can deal with, or really it really isn't, and it does just need to go.
So we could put that on a future imminent meeting of this committee?
Yeah, I think that would be good, Chair, if we can.
So looking at my colleague Lauren. we can juggle the work plan. That's okay with the committee? Liam? Yep.
Yeah, just on that, as the airport is owned by jointly us and Cheltenham, I'm wondering whether that should be a joint scrutiny meeting between Gloucester and Cheltenham scrutiny meetings.
I'm okay with that, Chair, but I know how long it took to get a joint scrutiny meeting before, so I'm surely they've got a lot of urgency in this as well, so it's something they will want to address quite quickly.
Taking that forward, we could, we are due to meet our colleagues from Cheltenham in terms of the joint committee we've got set up. So we could organise a meeting of that, just thinking out loud, and then invite other members to come along and take part. Open it up, in other words. We are, as I said, it's really important that we get this joint meeting back on the road again, and then open it up to other members. Sure, the leader will help us to achieve that.
It's your call. It doesn't need my input to have a joint scrutiny committee. You need to negotiate with Cheltenham Borough Council. And if you wish to invite the board of Gloucestershire Airport to the meeting, you can do that. And the new MD and the chairman can tap, and no doubt, if you want to ask for the other board members, they can possibly turn, but it's entirely up to you. Nothing to do with me.
Okay, I'm going to hand over to Lauren, who's going to advise us of a way forward.
Thank you, Chair. So just to confirm, we do already have some joint scrutiny work lined up with Cheltenham over the next few months. We haven't had a date for that yet because obviously Cheltenham have elections coming up. I'm in touch with the Democratic Services team, but there was a proposal to reconvene the joint scrutiny panel. I'm sure I can take away an action to discuss that and do some scoping with the Chair about what that would look like. But I would be cautious about duplicating the work of the joint panel. You don't want to be doing it in two different footprints.
Just a thought there with Lawrence just prompted me that Cheltenham do have elections coming up. So has that been noted as a significant risk? Because I think Cheltenham, you said they were quite strong on certain strategy for the airport. So if that administration changed, would that be a significant risk to whatever happens with the airport?
The administration is unlikely to change because only half the council's up for election anyhow, and it's unlikely that all those would be lost by the Liberal Democrats.
You're the optimist, aren't you? Let's move on.
I'm sure the council's administration won't change, but I would have thought trying to get a scrutiny meeting at this point, the joint scrutiny meeting, might be difficult during an election period. It might well need to be after, but. Your invite to Gloucestershire Airport is a matter of consideration as well.
Yeah, thanks. One more. We can make that work. We can make that work. Okay.
Just really quickly, I just wanted to address the leader's comments, saying about disingenuous comments. Now, our role as councillors is to act on issues of the residents, the businesses, and there was a lot of interest on social media. Where those rumours came from, I don't know and I can't say, but it was genuine concerns of residents and businesses. So I think to call that disingenuous is not very fair, and we need to be listening to the people of our city. And yes, you get some people on social media that are a bit of keyboard warriors, but it doesn't mean that their concerns or their fears, because their fears are that they will be left with a bill, and they are. So we do need to take them into consideration and not just brush them aside all the time.
Chair, I never said the people on social media were being disingenuous. I never said that. I said a lot of them might not have been fully informed by it. Two, I was referring to the comment that I think was clarified from Saj Patel, there was something fishy going on. That was disingenuous. And it was constant disingenuous behaviour from the Conservative group at times is frankly frustrating. And Stephanie Chambers now trying to widen it up and make accusations about her, for her to suggest that I was making that comment about people that commented on social media. That's disingenuous. Her comments are disingenuous. She should retract those comments.
Chair, I'll just respond. I said that as councillors, we were responding, as I know Saj Patel was, to the comments that he had seen and questions he had had in regards from businesses. So that is what I actually said. I didn't say you were directly saying that about the residents. I'm saying he was acting on what those residents' concerns were, as we all should be.
Okay, thanks, Steph. Going to call it a halt there. So, wow, that's an hour and a half. We've spent a lot of time on it, and rightly so. So, do we have a way forward looking at committee? Do we have a way forward by taking on board the idea of a meeting with the joint committee, getting SMT to prepare a paper for us, giving us options, getting a debate going? Is that the way forward?
The airport management team.
Say again?
The airport management team.
Yeah. Does that make sense? You okay with that, Steph? Steph Chambers? The sides of the chamber is a little bit quiet at the moment. Can I just check Anne and Alistair, you're okay with that? Okay, that's good. And so looking at Lauren again, this is one of my usual questions. How soon can we do that, please?
So my experience in the past with the airport is that they've always been more than willing to come and talk to the committee. They're always good as gold. Diaries are a challenge, to be honest, but I will do my best to get that.
Okay, so looking at the leader, we're just about to enter April. So the elections are early May. We could try and organise a meeting pretty soon after the elections in Cheltenham and see who they send along. You okay with that, leader? You think that's the way forward?
That's entirely up to you. You don't need my
I appreciate
permission.
that. I'm just being courteous.
I know you are, and that's really good. But managing director's got his hand up.
Mr. McGinty.
Sorry to put a spanner in the works, but I think Cheltenham will need to appoint their new overview and scrutiny committee before they're in a position to meet. So it won't be that early in May, I suspect.
We can still talk to them and persuade them we'd like an early decision. We'll do our best. Okay, on that point, which is the end of your session, gentlemen. Thank you for answering our questions and ready to move on. We have the cabinet member for, what are you cabinet member for? I can't remember your title.
Community engagement. I would like to make a request, if possible, that my agenda item be taken now. I have a dog home alone because my naughty daughter has disappeared from the house. And I can't leave her.
Really happy to take that. Pardon?
Pablo's interested to get this done properly.
Yeah, Jeremy, you just check the dog when you go on. I think just for...
That's fine, thank you. So we all know that food is a basic human need and that food insecurity devastates communities by driving chronic health issues, lowering educational attainment and stalling economic growth. It strains social cohesion, causes severe mental health stress and often forces families to make impossible choices such as reducing meals or skipping healthcare. It is also worth noting that childhood obesity in Gloucester is notably higher than the rest of the county and southwest averages. The purpose of this report is to show members of this committee the progress, the positive developments and ongoing work under the Nourishing Gloucester programme. You'll see under section 7 the incredible work that has been undertaken through different projects, initiatives and collaborations. I was pleased to see last year the opening of the Westgate Food Pantry, and many of you will know that there are now several food pantries across the city, including in Podsmead and Quedgley. These are very much about hands ups and not a hand out approach, where people can become a member and pay what they can afford. Pantries are integral to the Gloucester Food Ladder framework, which moves from emergency food aid provided by organisations such as Food Bank to affordable community-led food options like the food pantries. And it is predicted that with them now working together, This will reduce food bank parcels by 10% this year. So really, I'm bringing this report to you all today to note the positive developments which you can see, and also the very inspirational strategy that's also a part of your report pack. Thank you.
Okay, open it up to members' questions or comments. Staff Chambers, Tree, Owen.
Thank you, Chair. What, coming from a background of when I used to be a citizens advice advisor, we used to get something that some people that we called frequent flyers that were coming in regularly. And so what we desperately tried to do with them was really give them the money support so they could be sustainable going forward. So I just wanted to check, is that being done intensively throughout this process as well? Are we offering that kind of service alongside what is done with it?
I think it is. This is very different, though, to what we give the Citizens Advice Bureau to do their work. So this is almost like a separate entity, but we're certainly still doing that.
Yeah, thank you. It was just that when we would give, rather than, like you said, this is a help up rather than a handout, and it's making sure people can get out of that cycle of constantly needing it. Or that being said, we're going into another part of probably high inflation on food, which should be sad. Yeah.
I was just going to comment actually that that's been one of the critical changes between the funding. So the Household Support Fund is now the Crisis Resilience Fund, and the main difference in those two funds is the Crisis Resilience Fund, which is the new funding that comes into the County Council and funds a lot of this work, is that there has to be a preventative component. So if somebody presents once for a food parcel, then that's fine, because sometimes, you know, people get it wrong and they don't budget. But if they present twice, then it has to come with a package of prevention, so supporting them with budgeting, making sure they've got some education around, you know, where did things go wrong, how might they change it, and obviously that is all linked in with the Citizens Advice Bureau. So I think that's a really, really valuable component of the new way of working, which has come with the funding as much as anything else. So, you know, we really welcome that.
Thank you. That's really good news to hear. Thank you.
I was recently talking to someone who volunteers with one of the pantries, and they were saying that a major concern that they've been having over the last few months is that public donations have gone down. And yet that is only to be expected. I think all of us are sucking air between our teeth and taking a very, very big breath when we go shopping at the moment with the cost of everything. So, yeah, it's only natural that there are going to be more people struggling and more people needing support because wages are not going up. But a lot of those people are the very same people who were supporting pantries and food banks by making donations. So how are we going to mitigate that shortfall in donations?
Thank you. It's a really serious question you've raised, and I think it's going to, I think it's what Stephanie alluded to as well, with what's happening with possible food prices rises, which we will see. It's going to really impact them considerably. And I think that is why we have a role to play as a council in this, and that's why it's important that our grants continue to pay into the pantries, and also for the managers and the staff within those pantries to think creatively in how they're going to do this. I know with the Westgate pantry, you have to pay like a £5 membership, and then things are very costed sort of to the point that it's affordable. But again, you know, we don't know where we're going with that in terms of everything. So it's a very fair point. But that's why it's really important that we continue to endorse this work and the partnerships that we have with them. So thanks for that, Jane.
Thank you, Chair.
Microphone, so, Owen, your turn, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I searched for the word childhood in the strategy, and it appears once, and that was, as you alluded to, about childhood obesity. However, education appears 18 times, and that's very pleasing to see, because behaviours learnt as a child are the things that we end up doing as an adult. How are we going to ensure that we are educating the youth of today so that they are eating healthily, so that we don't bring health problems into the future?
Thank you for your question, Owen. I think adults have a role to play, their children, and actually it should be the educating of the parent or caregiver, whoever that may be, to provide that education as such. I think the public health within the county have a really big remit in terms of the children's aspect of obesity, which involves the education aspect of it. I was sorry to hear that actually children's only mentioned once. And I think I agree with you that it's, if we educate our children, then that's taken into adulthood, because of course it's a cycle that if a child's obese, then they will go into being obese within adulthood as well. So there is definitely a role to play. I think that it's very much a joined up approach, and I don't think we can underestimate how much the county council does in terms of this and the funding they have in public health. And there are reports within the county that come to the Children and Families Committee and also to the Adult Social Care Committee that really looks at this in detail. And there are weight loss programmes where it's been funded quite a lot, actually, in terms of trying to do that education that you've alluded to. Thank you.
Thank you. In fact, children appears 53 times, so I apologise. I searched for childhood earlier, but children do appear in the report.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ruth, for reminding me about the Crisis Resilient Fund, which replaced the other. I was at a conference back in February, Karen and I, and we had a presentation from the Trussell Trust, and they mentioned the issue of cash first, and I've just looked that up. And it says, CRF from 1st of April provides grants to local authorities providing a cash-first approach to support residents facing financial crisis. I did have a conversation post that with Gupti, I think, to say, well, how is cash first going to work in Gloucester then, given my interpretation of cash first is that you hand over some cash to someone to go out and buy some food. Now, knowing local authorities like I do, having worked, to try and get some cash from a local authority to give to a person who's desperate for food is an issue. So how's that going to work?
I'll answer that, but actually it ties quite well into Rebecca's answer to the question earlier about the collaboration with the County Council and other partners. So the direct payments, which is what we're calling them, will be delivered through the County Council because they've already got the mechanisms in place to do all the right checks and to make all those payments through their existing processes. So we won't, as we're not the partner that's going to be delivering the direct payments. I think one of the reasons for doing cash first is because what we're aware of is a number of people won't ask for help and go to a food bank. So, you know, they actually want to have money in their pocket to go to a shop and buy things like normal people. So we have got a plan for that, and it is going to be through the County Council.
Anybody else? Anne. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. This strategy is out of date. Do you have any allocation in your work plan to update it?
No, it's not out of date. It was a question we actually asked Ruth earlier on. So it's a strategy that went from 2023 to 2028. So it is due to be reviewed, you're right. So they will look at reviewing it towards the end of this year, ready for any new local government reorganisation that takes place, which will then be adopted by then the new organisation, however it's going to be.
And how have you evaluated this to see that it's actually brought good value for money for the investment the City Council has put into it?
I think it's more of a question, are you talking about KPIs, sort of key performance indicators and measurements?
Overall sense that the amount, because there's a huge amount of officer time and capability that goes into this work, so that as the cabinet member that's responsible for it, you can see that this work has done what we asked it to do, and it's actually returned not just KPIs, but actually meaningful change, and that would feed into the development of a future strategy.
Okay. Interesting, yeah, because it's been externally funded, then we wouldn't necessarily capture data. That said, it is something that it would be nice to have some form of measurement from, but then I don't think you can measure giving meals to children who need them, because I think, in a sense, that is ultimately what we should be striving to do. So in one respect, I really do like KPIs because they show a measurement. But on the other hand, I don't think you can measure the success of food because, as I say, food is a basic need. And if you look at all what's in Section 7, this is about giving food to where it's needed and people actually coming to accept that because they need it. I don't think, as a society, we would have those that are in full-time jobs and on quite a lot of money going to these options and seeking out this sort of support. So therefore, whatever we can put into this for children is got to be good. Especially when it is such a low cost. We're talking about Gloucestershire Airport and how much we're wasting every month. So just think in terms of what we put towards this is incredible, and all the work that's been done. And actually, we don't have many officers within the City Council actually full-time on this. I think we've got one, haven't we? Leanne Purnell. You know, she does an absolutely amazing job full-time, and she's got her ears and eyes to ground on all these different projects. So absolute well done to her.
So partly this is depending on what this work is doing in terms of getting to some very big societal problems and some really serious issues we're looking at. As you've alluded to, we have a limited amount of resource. How are you planning to make best use of that resource so that we can get the best return to move this work forward?
I think it's in these pages. I think what you're seeing here is exactly where it's going and where it will continue to do so through this new fund. And I think that will continue. The whole theme of food is very much county driven. And it was a question that I asked Gupti actually, because I did wonder, you know, where that had came from. And I think, you know, what kind of society would we be in? What kind of local authorities would there be if we didn't have this for people and we didn't have these projects and we didn't have, you know, these pantries working with food banks and, you know, the Long Levens food swap and the City Church community meals. And there is so much going on within each one of our different divisions that I think that in itself shows, and it will continue because it's external funding. This is very different to it being a part of the council budget. This is external funding that comes in for the sole purpose of these projects, and therefore it will just continue.
Thank you. The only thing I'd say there, it's quite worrying that you're talking in terms of county divisions and you're talking in terms of county. What does this city do to make sure that we as a city keep an eye on this area of work? But thank you for your answer. It's very encouraging.
Can I just come back to Anne there? It's just really to say that our officers in the city, of course, have meetings with our county officers' colleagues. So they've got a huge knowledge of what is going on in terms of what is happening on the county. And I often ask, because it is quite complex, it is quite confusing, sort of what funds what and that kind of thing. And so they really do know that level of detail.
A resource within our own membership as councillors, we've got Louise Walker, who works at the food bank, so she's always happy to chip in and tell us what it's like. Okay, Alistair Chambers, I think.
Thank you, Chair. There's a comment from Anne Radley regards if this document was out of date. I think you said officer-led, you've been told it's not.
Alistair. It's not out of date in the sense that it is continuing on through those years, so it will be reviewed and looked at again. But there is some reference in there to one particular policy that looks at 2026. So it's a blueprint, I suppose you could say, for looking ahead towards the future. So it's not like an annual strategy. It was something that was done. It's something that we can take forward and something that can be reviewed in the future.
The reason why I think it is out of date is Appendix 6, current food provision by ward signposts people through the Nourishing Gloucester website to community cafes where they offer low-cost donation food. You've got the Long Table Matson, that's been shut for over a year now. Got the Friendship Cafe that's just shut in Matson, Robinswood. You've got Roots Cafe Shop as well. So you've got 50% here. And I think the Butterfly Coffee Shop shut as well. I'm pretty certain the one in town. So there's only 2 out of 7 here that are still functioning. I'm not even sure Poet's Pantry is still functioning. That said, the document's signposting people to numerous community cafes for low-cost food and help, and also supplies where they're not open. If you're not going to be reviewing the whole document, can you at least review the signposting pages, if that's okay?
Thank you, Alistair. I think the whole document will be reviewed at the end of this year. I did notice those myself. I think it just shows where we've gone from. So it's from 2023 to now, we have lost those cafes. But that's not to say we won't have some others coming up, but I take your point.
Given that those community hubs have closed down, and looking at the figures on Appendix 5, 2021 showed house referrals by household of 343, and that's gone up 56% in 1 year. Food distributed has gone from 6 tonnes to 10 tonnes, a 61% increase in 1 year. Number of foods gone from 14,000 meals to 23,000 meals, a 64% increase in 1 year. The number of people fed had gone from 680 to 1,175, a 73% increase in 1 year. Given that those are stark, really concerning figures for just 1 year, and that's from 21 to 22, we're now 4 years on. We need to see these figures really and see what the state is. And also we need to consider that there might be a drop in number of food people have been issued, but that might be down to the community hubs and centres closing, not necessarily that there's not a need. Does that make sense?
I think it just shows the sad indictment of our society, that there are those that are really in need and that need this food provision. And I think that goes beyond local authorities. That's something that government have got a big responsibility to undertake. And I think that is why the Crisis Resilience Fund came into being. And I think that's why the cash is also come into being, because I think this is something that the Labour government recognise and that they are doing something about. Politically, remember the time that you're talking about was very much sort of in a cost of living crisis. There was big that's not to say that we're going to not go back into that, because I think we are. And I actually think that those figures you'll see increase, the ones that you've talked about tonight. So it goes a lot deeper than local authorities. Ruth, did you want to say?
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to clarify that the the information that you've just shared, Councillor Chambers, is from the original strategy, which was written in 2023. So the point of the demonstration of 2021 and 2022 data was to demonstrate the need for a food strategy, which is why we wrote a food strategy. So, you know, the purpose of that data was to show that there was a need. So it does show that there was a need. We know that that need has continued to grow. We know that there is a cost of living crisis. We have a cost of living action plan. The work around food poverty is part of that cost of living action plan. But the purpose of the strategy is to work as a system, and this is not the City Council doing it, it's not us doing it single-handedly, it is to develop a way of working in a sustainable community-led way to tackle the issues that are being seen in our communities. And those communities are different. You know, the needs in different communities are different and how they're responded to are different, which is why it's really important that we work locally in those communities. So this is not about the City Council doing something in a certain way. It's not about the County Council doing something in a certain way. It's about how we facilitate communities to do things in a sustainable way, which is going to, in perpetuity, meet the needs as, you know, society brings, you know, different challenges. So that's the purpose. It's not going to be perfect and it's very difficult to measure. But I just wanted to make sure we were really clear about why that data was in there, because that was the reason we wrote this strategy in partnership in the first place.
Just to come back on that, I appreciate you based the data on that to write this Nourish and Gloucester report. But the report in itself is outdated, signposting people into the wrong locations that are no longer there. And not only that, there's been no evidence. There's been in the last 3 years since this report's been written, there's no follow-up on those figures. Has this Nourishing report strategy, has it improved them? Has it made any changes? We've got no information in front of us. There's nothing to compare it to. So we're kind of blind since 2021, which you based this report on the figures. It's actually older than 2023 then. It's 5 years late, really, to go to 2021 figures. So what I'm saying on that is when can we have something to compare this strategy to, and some actual figures and data to show if this strategy is working or if we're sort of not going for any far forward?
You've raised a fair point. It's something that I have raised in my portfolio holders briefings in terms of those kind of measures. I want to make sure that whatever money we spend in any organisation or any collaboration is getting to the right people. And that's something I will take up further. Just to note that I believe it's up to date online. So if you go onto the website, it is. I know that's not very good for those who aren't very digitally literate, but online it has been updated, so it's not out of date online.
Presumably, Rebecca, a lot of people who use the food banks will have easy access to being online. So sorry, Alistair, for jumping in.
Thank you, Chair. This really is the last question. Well, it's more of a bit of advice, really. When Fair Shares do their deliveries, they do some food deliveries and then they're distributed in community sort of hubs and whatnot. What can be done about community volunteers literally turning up and taking the best products for themselves and more than what they should be allocated? Because I've had several complaints that that's happening, and obviously I sat on my hands. There's nothing I can do on that.
I would just say, Alistair, if you've got any information on that, then please do email it through to Gupti and myself. I'm not aware of that happening, but if you know of that, then please just email it in so that we can look into that a bit further. That's all I can really say. That's a shame if that's the case, but I've not heard anything of that nature myself.
Could I email you instead of Gupti just because you're a bit responsive?
Yeah, sure. Just email it across to me and then I will forward it to Rick.
Okay, can we move on? Is that okay? So, Karen, you've been very patient.
Thank you, Chair. Similar points, really, to Councillor Radley and Councillor A. Chambers, in that I realise now that obviously I can go online and look at more up-to-date figures, but looking at Appendix 7, where you've got the half figures, which I'm particularly interested in, the figures that you've got for summer 2021 and those for 2022 are not the same figures. So it's very difficult to compare the 2 years as to to how things were developing. So I will go online and have a look later on, but I was just interested that we measure the same criteria year on year so we can tell how the strategy is developing.
Thank you for that, Karen. I think it would be nice to formulate a recommendation from this committee, which what you're saying is about consistency in terms of measuring, and so some real data on this. I don't want to give you a recommendation because I'm the cabinet member, but if you could formulate one to that effect, if you're happy to have something like that, then I would certainly carry that forward. I think it is important to have that, just so you can see the difference that it's making. I think, though, what Ruth was saying, sometimes in these instances, it is really difficult to measure because, like, if you have a child who comes to, like, Venture, for example, and gets the support and gets food given or whatever, it's very, like, I suppose they could statistically tally it, if that makes sense, of how many meals are given, which actually there is figures in here to say how many certain lots of meals were given. So, but how you measure, was that the only meal that child had that day? Was that child really hungry and needed that meal? Do you see that the measure is really, really difficult? But it's something that I can take back to the officers and see how we could formulate some form of measurement, which goes further than how many meals are provided or how much is given. Because I think you're wanting more than just that, aren't you? You're wanting, like, we could do it in a qualitative way in getting testimonies and stories of what it's done. But I think it is difficult to measure. But if you've got any recommendations to what you would like to see, then please do. I'm really open to taking that back.
Okay, so we're looking for recommendations to Rebecca take back as a committee.
Can I just come back on that?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, yes, I appreciate there are stories behind everything and stories behind individuals, but really what I am looking for is the raw data so that I can say that in 2021 we gave out 10,000 meals, in 2022 we gave out 15, so obviously the need is increasing. I appreciate you can't always say that every one of those 10,000 meals was absolutely needed. There's always going to be people who not take advantage, but who use these kind of schemes when maybe they're not as needy as some others. But whatever, as you rightly point out, we're still feeding children here. So I really don't want to know exactly how hungry they were before they came, sort of thing. So just to have some basic figures so you could see whether the need was increasing, and then it would give us something to compare.
Thank you. I think that's a really good recommendation, actually, and that's something I will go back. And I think it is something that I have spoken about before, but I'm sure between Leanne and Gupti, there should be that information anyway. So, okay.
I think the report, it needs updating, doesn't it, with the current data and all the rest of it. But I think that the references to health inequalities and deprivation is very important. It's one of the reasons I became a councillor a long time ago. And I've also got always a bee in my bonnet about food labelling, but we won't go into that tonight because it's going on. But you go into Morrison's, you think, oh, that soup looks good, and you buy soup and it says it's low fat and all the rest of it. And then you get home, and while it's whizzing around in the microwave, you look at it, and then in the smallest of print, it says per quarter of can. And the number of times I've been tricked by that really winds me up. I brought it up at a county council meeting the other day to talk about more accurate food labelling and contents, and I think that's something we need to do. But it's we're reaching hour of 8:30 when we're required to take a vote. So, Rebecca, can we call it a day there? And excuse me.
Yeah, I will be brief, but it ties into something I've been talking to Ruth about anyway with the emergency planning. Now, through COVID, we all saw that was, when we muddled through and we got there, the community really stepped up and everybody worked together, and that was good. And I'm sure we've learned lots from that process. I was speaking to some farmers a couple of months ago, beef farmers from Gloucestershire, And I'm sure Ruth knows there's a massive hay shortage, which means the farmers are having to bring in more food to feed their animals over the winter. So we're already going to see a hike from that. We've also got the Iran war, and as we had with the Ukraine war, that created, again, food prices going up. There's going to come to a point, I think Tree mentioned about people donating less to food banks. There's going to come a critical mass point soon where definitely not through our hands and really out of the government's hands, these wars and everything going on, and plus the weather and war, you can't control, can we? Do we have an emergency plan for this critical mass? Because there may be less charitable giving, because generally people can't afford it. Can we build that into our emergency planning, and particularly with the county council as well?
So I don't think it's an emergency plan because it's not an event that we're dealing with. But I think, the whole purpose of this strategy is about resilience, it's about sustainability, it's about education. So, the more people that know how to tailor their cooking to meet their budget, the better. If we can educate them to do that, they can start to save costs straight away. So I think the more we roll out the educational piece about what choices you can make, the reality is meat is expensive for everyone, isn't it? So if people can learn how to partly cook more vegetarian, how to cook half their week meat and half their week vegetarian, if they're struggling month on month, then they can eat a bit more vegetarian that month, so it's about education, isn't it? It's about giving people the skills to be able to make good choices based on their personal situation. And I think, we are going to be limited what we can do about the cost of food. All of us are, aren't we? And that's the reality. Fuel costs more for farmers, hay costs more for farmers, the weather's having an impact. So, I don't think it's an emergency piece of work, but it is a resilience and public health piece of work. And I think that is why this work is so important, because it's about making sure that communities can support each other to learn, support each other to share resources. I think that's also part of the challenge. So, I think you're right. There is a piece of work to be done and more of a focus to be brought to that. But I think it is through this strategy as opposed to through emergency planning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I suppose my thought with emergency planning is I just feel we're going to get there because of the fertiliser that's already stopped. We can't get that into the country at the moment. So we're going to come to a point where not necessarily all of a sudden, but where so many people, no matter how educated or how they budget, some foods are going to become unavailable. And we do need to have some sort of plan of how that is facilitated.
I think that's a government thing, though, isn't it? It might be that we'll see rationing again.
You asked for recommendations, Chair. You asked for recommendations on this, and so I would find it useful as the piece of work that the city is supporting is mainly that coordinating and convening role. We can go to the district lead for half and ask for numbers, and that can easily be provided. But I'd like a bit of a narrative around the officer time that we have put in for, and what that has done and how that has moved this work forward. So, for instance, before you were in post, I believe we had a dedicated officer that was looking at this work. It would be useful to sort of understand a little bit about how that worked, and it would be useful to understand how this work will be supported now that we have much less officer time available. So my recommendation would be a bit of a description, a bit of a narrative around how this work is supported and how that officer time is directed.
Wants to come back.
Yeah, Ruth.
Just to make a really quick point for the committee's awareness, is the officer time is funded through this work, not by the City Council. So it's not a City Council investment in this. It is all funded through the work. So I don't know if that makes any difference, but just for information.
Those in favour, please show. Any against? Cheers, thank you. So what I've got, well, just thank you for very patiently explaining all of the issues. Well done and congratulations on your work, and we look forward to hearing from you again. Thank you. And
Thank you, Chair.
sincerely hope that there isn't rushing. And Lauren wanted to say something. I forgot to let you come in.
Sorry, Chair, I'll keep this really brief, but just to explain the process. So this isn't a cabinet report. It's a piece of work that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee requested, so it won't live in the cabinet report in the same way as if you were to do through pre-cabinet decision scrutiny, but it'll be in the minutes. And if the Chair wants to follow that up with an email, I can help with that tomorrow.
Well, you rattled that off, but I think we got it. So need to put it to the vote that we carry on for another bit longer. Is that okay? All those in favour? Or will all those in favour of extending this meeting, please show. Okay, and any against? No, okay, that's fine, thank you. So where have you gone? So Alison and Declan, I think this is your report.
Terry would like to know how long we're going to be here.
How long are we staying for?
How long do you want to say?
30 minutes. Up to. So by way of introduction, can I thank you for turning up. Declan, were you? Can I say that in the pre-meeting, we were disappointed that yet again, we have a very, albeit a short paper, which we need to consider this evening, but delivered on the day of the meeting. And I think that you'll find that's the last time we're going to accept that. And if papers arrive on the day, or even the day before, if it's after 12 noon, you'll be finding that we're saying we can't take that. That's just not fair and it's not good scrutiny. That said, I just want to refer to a sentence hidden away on page 23, and I'll read it out. That sentence says, the shift in leadership brought in by the current Section 151 officer has been a breath of fresh air for the council. Moving forward to self-enabling finance service is important, not only for budget managers, but also for the mindset of members of the finance team and councillors. So Alison, it's really good. You're the only person singled out in this report for that sort of comment. And I think all of us would want to congratulate you and thank you for the work that you've been doing ever since you've arrived here, and just say how we endorse that part of that very small but important part of the LGA report. So please accept our congratulations. Alistair. So, yeah, do you want to reply?
Yeah, can I just reply to that? Thank you very much for that. But I have to say that I might be the only one singled out, but it's actually been a real team effort. The finance team have worked really well together. Huge amount of challenge, and we've still got a lot of challenge, but we've made significant improvements in the last 6 months. And we've got a real plan to continue with that, which hopefully you can clearly see from the information that we've provided to you tonight, that we've got a real clear plan to move forward. But it's not without challenge, but the team have really stepped up to work with that. So I'm only as good as the team I've got around me. So that's really important, I think, for you to.
No, sure, that's fine. But in a report which is quite challenging and doesn't make for too good reading, that sentence stands out like a lighthouse, if that's the right expression. Sure, it's not, but somebody think it's something better. So, who wanted to go first? Do you want to introduce the reports? We've read them all. Chief Executive, we've seen your report, and I don't know if you've got anything you want to add to it, but it all seems fairly self-explanatory.
Chair, just a few things that this report went through Cabinet on the 11th of March. There's 12 recommendations in it. If you go to the actual LGA report, it tells you what the 12 recommendations are. We've endorsed all those recommendations, and I would expect them to all be delivered. This stems from a decision made by the Cabinet in September when the Cabinet papers were looking at the first set of financial headaches which were reported to us, that we added a couple of resolutions to those recommendations. The one was to request a report into the capacity, capability and resilience of the finance team, because we were concerned that this is one of the problems. We were fortunate that we had a new Section 151 officer take up office in April, and we could see that there were problems there. And we just thought that the most effective thing to do would be to have an independent review of the finance team, which was commissioned by the managing director. And to some extent, it was similar to the Ernst & Young paper that came to Cabinet in October. There was no coincidence in that because we did that independently, but the Ernst & Young report that we all endorsed also suggested doing that. In actual fact, if you go back to November 2022, the Corporate Peer Challenge, there was also, interestingly, a reference which said consideration should be given as to whether resources of the finance team are sufficient to deliver Q3 and Q4 budget monitoring reports to time, accountability for and governance of the project for delivery of the recovery of the financial data that's to do with the cyber attack. For example, there are no risk registers or monitoring of costs. To complete the work, the finance team may need additional capacity. That wasn't introduced. We've got one additional officer, and we are looking to. We're also putting in a deputy 151 officer in there, and to try and fill these couple of vacant posts, I think, and also make a couple of the posts permanent that are in the finance team. But the whole objective was to strengthen it, and there's money in the budget to do so. And if it's required, if Alison comes to us and says, we still need additional support, then we will make sure that we secure the funding to do that. But this is a critical area of the council's services, and it needs to be strengthened. And we're very fortunate we've now got a very good 151 officer who's done an excellent job. And, as it said, the report mentions how it's a breath of fresh air in the financial services of this council.
Can comment, and I know it's always wrong to single people out, but you were the only person mentioned, so I don't have any options. Okay, so Owen, then Tree, then Alistair Chambers. Yep. Okay, Owen.
Thank you, Chair. I feel I really shouldn't be asking this question to the current leader of the council, but perhaps you can speculate on what happened in 2022, because a peer review from there, as you've just said to complete the work, the finance team may need additional capacity. Reading the report in front of us today, we recommend that the council urgently review the finance team to ensure there is sufficient capacity. Can you speculate on why that previous 2022 peer review didn't lead to improvements in the finance team?
Difficult to speculate or to understand exactly why it happened, because we didn't take office until May 2024. But I think it is an example of the problems that we faced on taking up office. And, members will remember that, or know, that 3 years sets of accounts were not done, unfinished, and left a very big hole in the council's finances, and made it very difficult for anybody to understand precisely where the financial team. It's a pity that those recommendations were not brought to Cabinet officially to actually propose recommendations which would have strengthened the team. But we're left with a legacy that we have to deal with, and we've dealt with it, and we've taken actions on that.
Thank you. You also mentioned whether our current budget and whether we can afford to have additional people working. It also states at point 8 that about training and development of the team, and that may also not be budgeted for, but we need to find those resources, as investment in people will certainly make a huge difference.
Not sure I understood the question. I mean, we have budgeted in the budget that you approved at council for an additional 250,000 across the finance team and the asset management team to deliver the strengthened finance to meet the requirements of this resource structure and to deliver the recovery plan. But I'm not sure I understood your question.
My question was around whether we've also budgeted for training of those people, which is one of the...
So we at this moment, we don't have any reason to believe that we don't have the funding available to deliver any training requirements of those teams. I mean, it depends quite who we get in as to what their training requirements are. So we're in the process of recruiting to some of those posts now. The vast majority of staff in the finance team are going to have, as part of the annual appraisal process, they have a training needs assessment conversation, and out of that will come sort of actions that will be individually based. There is some collective training being done for them, organised for them, but the vast majority of training needs will be individual and personalised to each person in the team. And each team in the council has a budget for training. So at the moment, I'm not aware that that budget will be insufficient.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wasn't sure it was my turn yet, but okay. We see that the LGA report recommended 2 structures, but you've gone for another structure, and I'm quite surprised you commissioned a report and they came up with 2 structures, but you've gone with another one. So what I'm after is, what's the rationale for the structure that you've put in place as opposed to the 2 that were suggested?
Sorry, I keep pressing the wrong button. The 2 structures that they put in place were just sort of examples. We had quite a conversation with them about the different structures, and there could have been quite a lot of different iterations of structure. But what I was keen to do, what I needed, and that came clearly out of the LGA report, but I sort of knew this myself, is that I needed to have some additional high-level management resource. So the additional resource, we've got 1 additional post in this structure, and that is the JS3 post. So I've got effectively 2 finance services managers. And what I wanted to do was to split the structure so that we had financial planning and budget monitoring and the sort of technical system side. That's not to say that people will work in silos, but it was so that there was a focus, and that was in the second structure about splitting it between the 2. But so I've taken bits out of the structures, but in discussions that I had with them, I was keen that we did put additional management capacity in. It's just slightly different from what they suggested, but it was part of a conversation that we had with them as well.
And have you taken on extra responsibility yourself? Because I see that Revs and Bens have come in as well as. Was that under your remit before, or is that new to you?
So when I applied for the post and was given the post, it included Revs and Bens and also included asset management, actually. And when I started in April, asset management had already been moved to Andy Heron, who has got a lot more experience than I have in that area. And Revs and Bens had temporarily been moved to Ian because he was doing transformation with Revs and Bens. And Revs and Bens has always historically sat with the head of finance and resources, and there is a lot of crossover, which is quite normal for the Section 151 officer to be managing Revs and Bens.
Thank you for that. Okay, page 25, the last paragraph says that the finance team is a collection of unsettled individuals rather than a team. and there is quite a difference in culture in many parts of the team, which is a bit worrying, really. What it suggests is that people are in the office, everyone is in the office at one day a week. Now, maybe I'm a bit old-fashioned, but honestly, is one day enough to bring everyone together? Because we're talking about communication here, we're about planning, we're about strategy, we're about problem solving and a whole range of other functions that go with that. And honestly, one day, or should it be more? Yeah, we're sorry, we're changing a culture here, really, because a lot of people are now used to that working from home culture, and we're asking people to come in, and people will be working their work lives around their family and their domestic duties and school runs and everything else as well. So there's quite a complexity in that ask as well.
The culture of the finance service is not just about coming into the office. It's about the way we work, and a lot of the issues are to do with the current structure is not very defined. The roles are quite confusing, and how people fit in and who people report to. So this is a package in terms of improving communications and the way people work. So the structure will be that people clearly know who they report to. There will be annual appraisals, there will be regular one-to-ones with line managers, which should improve communication. And there will be sort of operational team meetings and then the sort of management team meetings. So all of those communication streams have not really been in place, which clearly came through a bit ad hoc. We've put a lot in place over the last few months, but they weren't in place, which had a real impact on communication. So coming into the office, everyone coming into the office one day is only a very small part of that cultural change, that communication. And I've spoken to the team about the best way of bringing that in terms of having one day in the office to get them to help shape that, really, because you're absolutely right, because people are used to now working from home. There is a bit of a cultural change. We have got some people that come, we've got some finance people that come in the office nearly every day still. We've got some that come in one day a week already, and we've got some that hardly ever come into the office. So there is quite a change, but we're working on that. But I wanted to work with the team in terms of coming up with the best way of delivering that. But that is only a small part of improving the communication.
Okay, and I assume. Oh, here we go. I assume that will be subject to review at some stage or other. I don't know when, whether you've got a timescale in for that, but 6 months or something, probably, I assume so.
Yeah, absolutely. We will review it. If it's not working or it's not doing what we want it to do, we will change it.
Thank you.
Cheers, Chair. I was hoping Declan was going to be part of this. I thought being finances and resources, he would have been up on the table too. I see Jeremy's answering his questions for him today.
There has been some confusion that some update paper's been sent to Declan, but the original report that went to Cabinet was in my name, so we were assuming that it was myself that was going to be here. But if there are some specific questions, Declan is over there, and I'm sure he's happy to answer the question. But I apologise for that, but it purely confusion on that. I just assumed quite clearly that it was be questions to me as it was in my name. It was in the name of the paid service. It was still the leader of the council that was presenting it.
Depends what the question is.
Yes. The report highlights the Gloucester City Council's finance team has face prolonged instability due to frequent leadership changes, reliance on interim staff and system disruptions. These factors have led to unclear roles, limited accountability, a transactional rather than strategic approach of financial management. The review based on interviews and the DMA methodology identifies urgent need for a permanent structure with clear roles and responsibilities. I saw there's an appendices of structures. Do you know which structure has been chosen?
The one that's in Appendix 2 of your report. So neither of the two that, this was Alwyn's question, Terry's question. The LGA team recommended two structures. The Chief Finance Officer and I discussed, and her view was that a different structure was needed, and that was the one that was in Appendix 2 of the Cabinet report.
Sorry, to be clear, is that option 1 or option 2?
Neither. It was in Appendix 2 of the Cabinet report.
Okay, sorry, the paper's come out so late, Chair. I haven't managed to look through them. Oh no, I've been asking for this report. I've been asking for this report since December, and I've refused it several times, Alwyn. Since December, Alwyn. Since December, Alwyn.
Sorry, that appendix has been in the public domain since early March and was circulated along with the rest of the papers for this meeting 8 days ago.
I was asking since December, though. Thanks, Chair.
The report was published in December, but it's headed up to December. Yeah, the LGA report.
It wasn't published in December.
Andrew, the LGA report was published by Cabinet for the 11th of March meeting. The meeting papers for the 11th of March report had an appendices, which was the preferred option for improving the finance team, and that was the one that was approved by the Cabinet. And so it's shaped like that, slightly different from the other two. But what it does do is provide for a strong Deputy 151 officer in the role to help manage the new finance team.
So Steph Chambers, Councillor, thank you.
Thank you, yeah. I've got a couple of questions. My first one was the mention of culture within the organisation and with the finance team. I raised this the other day where I think some of those cultures have sort of spread out, and I just wanted to know whether you are looking at all departments so we don't have the same issues. I have particular concerns, and not because of any capability, but I think the DEM services are particularly stretched at the moment. And that's nothing to do with capability or resources. It's just that our old monitoring officer had 4 days, and I believe she'd requested 5. Our new monitoring officer has 3, as far as I'm aware, days as monitoring officer. And I don't know whether that's been backfilled yet. So I just worried, and I wouldn't like the DEM services to become too stretched. So that's my first question. My next question was Councillor Wilderhood, is that right? Sorry. Mentioned about he would prefer to see the other leader up there to answer a question. Now, I looked at his question, which was about was it about the peer review and the resource team? That's right. So I've gone into the review of that peer review, and actually that does mention looking at the resources, and it was with the head of paid services to look at. There was no report, Jeremy mentioned, brought forward for that. And looking at the actual legislation in regards to head of paid services, because there was some indication by Jeremy that this was the previous administration's issue. So I've looked at the resources, and the head of paid services, his role is to bring a report forward regarding the number of grades and staff required by the authority for the discharge of their functions. So you probably can have that question answered, but it's just by the head of paid services who's actually here today. So I wondered whether you could respond into why that wasn't, since that seems to be an issue of the current administration.
Thank you, Chair. So in answer to your first question about sufficiency of resources, then obviously that is something that we look at permanently and across the whole council. We have a budget that we have to live within, and this council agrees that budget. So I can't say that I have enough people in every team, because I would like to have more people in every team. And if I had more people in every team, I'd be able to deliver services so much quicker and so much more fully. But I have to work within the budget that council sets me. So within that budget, I believe that we have sufficient resources to discharge our functions as best we can. And in particular, with the reference that you made to democratic services, I've had a number of conversations with the monitoring officer, the interim monitoring officer, about how we backfill her post and about the resource needs of DEM services. And indeed, they have been interviewing for DEM services officers, and possibly even by the time I'm saying this, we've been successful. Okay, right, there we go. So, so we are always looking to fill vacancies subject to the resource constraints that we operate in that are set by this council. In answer to the, I mean, it's a similar answer to the peer review, really, which is that the action plan that we wrote in response to that peer review report was talking about senior staff resources, and a senior management restructure was brought forward to council at the time, to cabinet. Well, it would have been cabinet actually at the time. And it recommended a new structure for the senior management team. So in answer to that specific question, the action of that peer review, in my opinion, was completed because it referred to senior management structures, not to the detail within the finance team.
Thank you, John. So, yeah, that does clear up then, because there was some suggestion there that this previous administration ignored the peer review, and John's saying it was fulfilled there. So I just wanted to make that that point. Thank you.
I think you were the last speaker, person. I think you were the last person who put their hand up. Whenever I say that, 2 or 3 go up. So Liam and then Anne.
I'll be quick. Did I hear you correctly earlier when you said that there's ambiguity around reporting lines of people not necessarily knowing who they report into?
There is currently, yes, with the structure we've got, it's not particularly clear, and we've got some vacant posts as well that doesn't help.
Okay, that seems quite a fundamental issue of structure. I can't imagine being in any organisation where the organisational structure of the team wasn't clear. Is that something that's resulted as a result of historic problems within just the finance team, or is that potentially something that's more cultural across other departments as well?
So every person in SAP, our management system, will have an accountable line manager. I think what Alison is describing is that because of the vacancies that the finance team were carrying, effectively the line management was escalating to someone different in the organisation because the post had been carried vacant, or it was being filled by an interim who therefore couldn't have done that line management function. So that this is not a cultural thing. If you tell me any person in this organisation, if you give me any officer's name, I will tell you who their designated line manager is. You wouldn't be able to get paid unless you had a designated line manager. So that is, yeah, it's a slight. But what happened in the finance team was the interims made that confusing as to who was actually fulfilling the line management function on a day-to-day basis because of some vacancies.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up.
Thank you, Chair. Reading through the report, it looks like things have been fairly chaotic, and it seems like the finance team has done its very, very best to get done what it needs to do with the resources that are available to it. How confident are you that these structures will give you enough to actually move to a point of stability?
I'm confident that once the structure is filled, that we'll have the resources we need at the right level. So we'll have the capacity and the capability to deliver what we need to deliver. The big challenge is getting that structure filled. So that's the challenge I've got now to get the right people in and that structure filled. In the interim, because obviously we've got the 25-26 statement of accounts that need to be published by the 30th of June to get us back on track in terms of timescales. I've appointed an interim who started today to help us with that process while I carry on and fill the structure, because nothing stops. So we have to continue, and I currently haven't got the resources to do everything we need to do.
Thank you. It is worrying when you're saying you haven't got the resources that you need to do everything that you're doing, but I appreciate you have to prioritise, because we all have to do that. Reading through the report, I was quite shocked when it was referring to last-minute requests for kind of financial data, and that was coming into the team in again, chaotic ways and putting stress. That is the most business-as-usual thing for a local authority that we've probably been asked to be doing since we became a local authority, almost before, when we were the Corporation of Gloucester. That really made me feel uncomfortable, that our systems have degraded to the point where something that should be like breathing, we haven't been able to do. So have you got, once you've got your officers in place, do you have what you need to get the job done in terms of our day-to-day now?
It's a $52,000 question, I think.
I didn't hear that. So, yeah, I'm confident that once I filled this structure, that we'll have the people to deliver what we need to deliver. Because we'll also have, I mean, it hasn't started too much yet for finance, but we'll also have the digital work involved with LGR and preparing for LGR. So once I've got the structure filled, I'm confident. But at the moment, I haven't got the structure filled. So I've got the interim that I've got in to make sure that we meet the close down deadline. But the rest of it is still being balanced at the moment until we get this filled, the structure filled.
What can council do to support this? What can we do as elected members, and what can be cascaded on to others within the organisation to give you the space you need to get out of this hole?
I guess what's really important for me is that we focus on moving the organisation forward, focus on moving finance forward, because we've got a good plan in place now to get we're going to publish the 24-25 accounts tomorrow. We've got a plan in place to publish the 25-26 statutory accounts by the deadline with the interim support that we've got, and SMT have been very supportive, as have members, with the additional funding that I need to do that. And we've got a budget monitoring process back up and running. It's still evolving, but it's producing a lot better information. We've also revised the budgets. It's about us keeping on track and moving forward and not being pulled back into historical stuff that is really important for me, because I have got very limited resources, so I need to focus them on the priorities.
Thank you very much.
Any more questions or comments? Okay, we've gone round the third time, I think. Get Steph and then I'll...
Right, thank you. There's something I got carried away with and I forgot to my post-it note here. So I wanted to also thank Alison for what it said in the report, but not only what it said in the report, by her reaction to your congratulations, because I thought that was a really good team way of moving forward and not accepting that praise yourself and actually saying it was been a team effort. And on that regard, I mean, this report, yes, it says there were issues, and yes, but we have to look at it in context of the time that was there. Yes, I think there could have been things could have been done differently and things could have been done better. You can always look back at that. But I think every person that did the role previous was doing their best job also, and stepping up when maybe they didn't have the capacity to step up, but just stepping up anyway and doing the best they could. So I just wanted to make that point, that I think nobody here has willingly, in this authority, let things go. I think everybody did everything that they could during that time. And I think it was just important to note that, and thank Alison there as well.
Thank you, Chair. You've said that you're very confident that things will improve in the future, and I'm wondering if we want to test that in the future, Chair, perhaps asking for an audit or something, without putting undue pressure on our finance team at all. Sometime in the future, I'd like to test these 12 recommended steps and see that we've made progress. Would that be possible, Chair?
Yeah, I'm sure. I think it's a good suggestion. It's whether or not the leader brings it back or Declan brings it back, and we could look at them. Hang on. What, on a bi-monthly basis? Just a very short report. Okay, John, you want to come in?
I was going to say,
I don't want to lose sight. I think it's a good suggestion.
Andrew, you're red, but
That's all right. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, yeah, I mean, that was the purpose of circulating the progress report on the 12 recommendations to you on Friday, because we wanted to show you that we are taking this forward. Alison and I pulled that report together, and we'd be happy to do that, but I would suggest once every 2 months is probably a bit too frequent. As Alison says, she needs to get on with focusing on the accounts closed down and stuff like that, and bedding in some of these new procedures. And we've also got the appraisals period coming up in the next 2 months. So can I suggest 5 or 6 months' time would be more appropriate period for the next update?
Okay, so what do we? I just want to agree. I just want to understand what we're agreeing. You suggesting quarterly or every 4 months?
I was suggesting that we have some form of audit in the future after implementation. I wasn't suggesting a more frequent review, but if you're suggesting something more frequent, it really mustn't be a burden on the team itself. So every 6 months may be appropriate.
Steph?
Chair, we have the quarterly outturn reports. What about just a couple of paragraphs update in those each time?
That's a good suggestion. Yep. You okay with that? Well, that's what we've agreed anyway, so hope you are. Okay. Okay, have you got that, John? Is that okay?
I will say it again. Alison's got her work cut out, and the whole of her team, in the next 3 months, reaching close down by the June deadline and doing all the appraisals and all the training and all the other actions that are in that. So with the greatest respect, a quarterly update will not give us time to have moved some of these things on. You know, all the stuff about the documentation, for instance, that's quite a challenging recommendation to do on a quarterly. So I'm concerned not so much for my time, but for Alison and her team's time to be updating this on a quarterly basis. And you asked me as a head of paid service to advise you on the resources of this council, and that's my
Alison,
advice.
last word to you before we make a decision.
I think 6 months would be appropriate timescale. Getting the new structure in place and up and running is going to be quite a lot of work. That's going to involve quite a lot of work. We've also got the 3 statutory recommendations that we've got an action plan that we have to report to Audit Committee, and that crosses over very much with some of the stuff in here as well. So you are getting regular monitoring reports in terms of our progress. So I think 6 months would be appropriate.
Okay, so can we note that in our minutes that we'll get a report in September?
Yeah. Okay,
that's soon whiz by. Anything else? Any other questions or comments? Just a quick. What you?
It's a
We're going to have to take another vote in a minute, whether we stay for breakfast.
It's a very quick one, Chair. You said comments. When's the appropriate time to respond to your comments in council, where you sort of gently suggested that views had been changed? Gently. I was wondering when we could formally respond to the issue that you raised in council.
The end of a long, harrowing meeting, didn't it? And I think I said we'd look at it, and it sounded a good idea, but I can't remember what that good idea was now. Sorry. Just refresh my memory.
It's when is the right time for that? Because is it we don't have an AOB? Is it something that I should table? Is it something that I should just say now? It's a timing question, so that I can formally come back to the comment that you made in council that the backbenchers you felt had changed their views, and I just wanted to reply to that.
Okay, sure. If it's a burning issue, please say it now. So I think I was making the point, I think I've got the context now, that the people sat in the back row opposite where I was sat or stood were all in favour of writing a letter asking for the forensic inquiry. Then all of a sudden, the people in the front row said to the people in the back row, that's not a really good idea, change your mind. And I suggested that might be going on, but I can't remember in the context of that. I can't remember what your question to me was. Just refresh my memory.
My question to yourself was, when is the appropriate time that we should respond to that? Because I think it's something that should be discussed. It's when that should happen. That was my question.
Can we, I didn't know you were going to throw that at me tonight. So can we put that on our next agenda? I'm not trying to rubbish it.
No, I'd be very happy with that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, well, it's my turn to get some questions now. Okay, so anybody else want to comment or comment or anything else you've forgotten? No. Alistair, very quickly.
Just like to thank Alison for her straight talking, straight questions, straight answers.
Yeah, that's good.
They're not rambling, they're not bypassing everything, they're just straight to the point. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Just very quickly, if you bear with me, my question is linked to that, because when you read the report, there are so many paragraphs, I've highlighted all of them, which say that the finance team were dysfunctional, they weren't talking to each other, it was abrasive, that's quite a strong word to use. When you arrived and after a few days, didn't you think, I'm not quite sure about this? If it was as bad as it's reported in this, and as somebody, I think it was Alistair, reminded us in our pre-meeting, these things are often sweetened anyway. You know, here's the original draft, and then it comes back, and then you agree a version, and it's not quite as scary as the first draft. So there must have been a point where you thought, geez, I can't stand this. I don't want to put you on the spot, but no, seriously, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but wasn't there a time when you thought, okay, I need some time to think about this? Maybe we can both at the next meeting, I'll answer Andrew's question, and if you can answer my question after we've had time to think of the answer.
Andrew, I think that's an unfair question to ask. And it might be good to finish the evening.
No, okay,
it's been a good discussion, and the officers have provided enough information, I think, for you to understand.
Can I thank everybody for their attendance? We've covered some important issues tonight, and I think we've done it in a constructive way. The cabinet's been really helpful most of the time, and as the chief exec has as well. So Steph, definitely the last word. Steph, you wanted to make something?
It's just work programme related, because that is an item on the agenda, isn't it? And I just wanted to say, we had the youth report pulled because I think it wasn't ready because somebody's left, and we don't have a youth engagement officer anymore. So I just wondered where the leader and the head of paid services there. Is that post being replaced, or is that one that's being left open now?
Thank you, Chair. That post was grant funded, so we have no plans at the moment to replace that post.
Thank you for clearing.